And the floor of the CMN, Doug Keck here with Regina Doman. Stop by our booth. How are you, Regina?
Hi, good to be here.
Now, you've been on EWTN before. You were on Life on the Rock, right?
Life on the Rock, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you're fairly high energy.
Yes, I'm sorry.
But you've got like 9 kids, right?
Yes. I've got, I've got 8 at home, and I've got 1 in heaven.
Okay.
And that's actually what one of those books is about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wait, is that the one on the story of Job?
Yeah,
okay.
Actually, yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about this, because you've written children's books over the years, right?
Yeah, my most famous book is Angel in the Waters.
Right, and what got you into writing children's books?
No, I just write stories.
Uh-huh.
And I write the story, and then I find out afterwards who it's for. And Angel in the Waters is very much a story for kids, but it's a story that many adults find very moving as well. Right. So I just say I write for people.
Now, you're also a CEO, though, at the same time here. You're wearing many hats. Of Chesterton Press?
Yes, Chesterton Press is our
company.
company.
Why did you decide to start Chesterton Press, and why Chesterton?
Well, G.K. Chesterton was the man who made me Catholic. Like, I was kind of on my way out of the church as a teenager, just because I was bored. It wasn't much fun. And
so you were born Catholic,
I was
but
born
you were kind of drifting like everybody else.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. But, I was always loved Jesus. And the evangelical church seemed so much more interesting, But then my high school English teacher, my senior year, gave me an essay by G.K. Chesterton. It was The Paradoxes of Christianity.
Okay.
And that was the essay that my mind exploded, and it's been exploded ever since. Like, that was the essay that convinced me to stay Catholic. And so, so a big part of my conversion, my personal journey, was with Chesterton. So when I decided to start a publishing company to publish my own fiction that I had written, we named it after G.K. Chesterton.
Did you always write?
I've always written, yeah. I always knew that that's what God wanted me to do, was just tell stories, Now,
you spent some time, working with the friars?
Yes.
In Father Benedict's group, right?
Yes, exactly.
CFRs,
yeah.
Right. Okay.
And that was really, really incredible. If any people who've read my book, Black as Night, know that I took a lot of the experiences I had with the friars and used them in that book. Okay. I'm a big fan of the friars and love Father Benedict.
Let's just talk quick, because you mentioned about your one child in heaven, and talk about the story of Job, because one of the things we always hear about, poor old Job, but so many of us don't even really know the whole story, especially, I have to admit, realizing that he lost 10 kids at once. You could get an idea why he maybe wasn't too happy with the Lord at that time. What's the point of it? What point did you get out of it, especially in your own personal life, in writing that?
Well, the story of Job is very interesting. It's different from my other books, because I do a lot of books that are specifically fun Catholic fiction to entertain people and to let them know more about the faith. But with the story of Job, it's hard to talk about. The anniversary is coming up this July, and on July 8th, about nearly 10 years ago, I was in a car accident, and I was driving, and my youngest child, one of my younger children, Joshua, who is almost 5, died in the accident. And it's hard for me to talk about, because obviously, and obviously that was just a cross that the Lord sent us, and I can't say why. But you see, through an amazing series of events, Father Benedict happened to be in town, and even though he didn't know me personally, because I knew the other friars, he came and he preached at the funeral. And he pointed out that, asking why is not a question that God will answer. Because, Jesus on the cross said, "Why have you forsaken me?" If God didn't answer his own son, it's not an answer that can be put into words. And that's what the story of Job is about. Right. And one day, and also at the funeral, certainly after the funeral.
And also that bad things don't happen to you because you've done bad things.
Exactly. But you see, that's what we want to think, because we're reasoning with human reason. And so when we ask the question why, we tend to think, well, it's because I was bad, or this person was bad, and you look for a reason.
And that's what Job's neighbors are trying to figure out.
That's what Job's friends did. Right. Exactly. And that's what tripped them up. Father Benedict said, that's not a question that you can ask. Right. You have to ask what.
Exactly.
What does God want
That's one of my
now?
favorite sayings he used to say. It's not why, it's what.
Yeah. Can I see the book for a second?
Yeah, sure.
Sorry, I'm like such a mom here. Basically, because Job's, here's Job, and he's like really, miserable and, and hurting, and his friends, who are good, holy people, come and they ask him why. And all they do is they torture him even more than he was before. But then at the end, after God has that little chat, Job has this chat with God that says everything right. His friends and neighbors come, and they ask what? What can we do to help this suffering person? And they are the reason, they're the instrument that God uses to heal. So after this happened to us, my kids asked me what the story of Job was. They want to know what it was about. And I told them the story. So this is my retelling of them.
Right.
This is what I told my kids. And they thought it was a great story.
Do you think I thought it was interesting in kind of reading your book as well, thinking about the neighbors, how we like, when something bad happens to somebody else, we like to disassociate ourselves and try and figure out,
that's why we ask why.
This isn't going to happen to me because you must have done something bad because I'm not doing anything bad, so this isn't going to happen to me.
It's a way of keeping yourself safe.
Safe, right.
I totally understand why people do it. It's a natural reaction because they want to save themselves and they want to keep themselves and their own kids safe. But that line of reasoning is so hurtful and so destructive.
Right, exactly.
You know,
You're blaming the victim in
that
case sometimes.
Yeah. But the Bible tells us it's a very natural reasoning, even for people of faith.
Right.
You know?
Right, because I
But the mystery of God, you know, it's not a question we can...
Yeah, perhaps the answers to Job's questions are beyond space and time and mere words. Perhaps the only answer is God.
Yeah. Because you see, when Job saw God... Is that
what you found in your life?
When Job saw God, he didn't need an answer. He withdrew the question completely. Mm-hmm. And that's just what's amazing is that he loved God even more just from seeing. He didn't need to know. Because, you know, when you love someone, you don't need to know why they do.
And that's what the world has problem understanding, right?
Because they don't love God.
Right.
So, but if you love doesn't need a reason. If you love someone, you don't need to know why they did something. You know? It's just not a question that makes sense.
Now, another book here that you brought along is The Pope, I Believe in Mercy, Francis. It's story by you and art by Sean Lamb.
Yeah.
And this is what's called, and younger people know this, a manga book, which is kind of like my simple understanding. It's sort of like anime in a storybook form, and a little bit like the way the comics were when I was growing up as a kid many years ago. Now, you know, sometimes people look at the style of this kind of thing and they say, oh, that's a little off-putting, it's kind of different. What was your interest in putting out a story that was produced as a manga?
Yeah, well, I have to admit, my kids had to tell me what manga was. Mm-hmm. Jonathan Lin, who owns that company, he founded it to promote the new evangelization. He's like an Asian American himself. And he approached me, and my kids, I was like, he wants me to write what? Manga? And my kids were like, Mom, manga! You know, and they knew all what it was, so they had to tell me. But it was very interesting to me because, you know, I grew up like you. I grew up on, you know, DC Comics, Marvel Comics, stuff like that. Right. The interesting thing about manga, because I had to find out what it was myself, is that in Japanese art, the characters, the heroes, always have these large eyes. Mm-hmm. That's very distinctive. And you'll notice that in manga, that the hero will have a large eyes, and the villains do not. Mm-hmm. The villains have closed eyes. Mm-hmm. And so I asked someone, you know, well, why is that? He said, well, you see, the hero has wisdom and insight. And that's why his eyes are large.
He sees things, right. Okay.
And that is exactly the reasoning that the Byzantines used in their icons. Like that is why the eyes of Christ and, you know, and Mary and the saints are so large. Mm-hmm. And I was like, isn't that interesting? That's an interesting. So for me, that made me go, well, there's a connection with Eastern Catholic tradition that you see replicated in Eastern secular art. So I wanted to find out more. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that that Jonathan told me is that, well, in manga, see, in America, comics are for kids. Right. We don't take them seriously. They're not very deep stories. He said, in Japan, it's different. He said, manga's for everybody. Mm-hmm. So in manga, you can tell a heavy, deep, serious story, and it's accepted. Whereas in America, I think I always felt, well, if I'm going to put the saints into a comic book, I'm trivializing the gospel. I'm making it less serious. And he said, no, we don't have that stigma. Right. If you put something in a comic book form, you're not doing something irreverent. And that's you're looking at it more closely.
And it's also a way to reach teenagers.
Absolutely.
Because they don't view it as being a kiddie book in that
Especially
way, right?
Young men. Mm-hmm. Because I'm a novelist, I write lots of books. I have a hard time getting young men to read my books. Why? A lot of guys just don't read because men are more visual. Mm-hmm. So I kind of, in my books, in my company, I'm always trying to get guys to read. Right. And when my kids saw Jonathan Lynn's products, they just, you know, and every time I bring his books to a conference where there are Catholic children, all the boys, all the young men, I just can't keep them on the table. So I was like, whatever he's putting out is reaching people. Right. So when Jonathan asked me, I was like, yeah, I got to be a part of this. Right. You know.
And it's important because so many times people will say to us, well, we got to reach the youth. We have to reach the young people. Yeah. And we have to, at the same time, keep the message straight, make sure we're teaching the truth, but put it in certain formats that's more accessible and they're more comfortable with, right?
And I just thought manga was a good format because it can deal with deep themes. You're allowed to have, it can't just be about people punching each other the way it is in American comics. Right. It's got to be, there is dialogue, there's actually struggle with deep issues. And so I thought, what a better thing to do than to do A Life of the Pope.
Right, and there's, you also did one, Habemus Papam, on Pope Benedict XVI.
That was, I loved doing Pope Benedict's life. I mean, I did not know the man very well before I started researching him, but I just fell in love with Joseph Ratzinger. I mean, It's one of my favorite books that I've ever written is Habemus Papam.
Now,
and I wish people would appreciate Pope Benedict more. He's so amazing.
Right. I think people have this this different image. He's a much different, kinder, gentler, very sweet man.
You know what's so interesting? Having been a papal biographer, because now I've done Benedict and Francis, before each of the men were elected, or in Joseph Ratzinger's case, before he entered the Curia, he was perceived as a liberal before he went to the Curia, and a conservative when he was elected Pope. Before Pope Francis was elected to the throne here, he was always perceived as a conservative until he was elected, and then you saw he was now seen as a liberal. When actually, each man is neither.
Right, exactly.
They're just very well-rounded and very different.
Right, and because we're trying to look at it in a lens of politics and put labels on people.
Which can only do so much.
Right, exactly.
You know, it's only about the life of the city, but the Pope is about the life of the heart.
Do you have another book in the works?
Yes, I do. I'm working on a biblical trilogy that I'm trying to find time to write with all these kids. But yeah, I would love to explore.
So when do you find time to write?
When do I find time?
Yeah.
Right now I have no time because I'm running a company. But, you know, here and there, you know, if you're a writer, you always have to steal your time from other places.
Right.
Every writer I know has, if they're a guy, they have a 9-to-5 job. If they're a mom, they're raising their kids. And when do they write? When they're not supposed to be writing.
Right.
You know, when they could
Do you write longhand or you type everything?
Oh, I gotta type. I'm too impatient. You know, there's not enough time. Okay. But I love the word processor, and yeah, that's how I do it.
Well, thank you so much, Regina.
Oh
Regina Doman.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks for stopping by. 2 books, Pope Francis, I Believe in Mercy, and also the story of Job. Thank you, Regina.
God bless you.
You too. We're here at the CMN, joined by Father Michael White and Tom Corcoran, co-authors of Rebuilding Your Message. Welcome, Father. Welcome, Tom. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I think you're new to Bookmark, so why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how this is actually not your first book, but the third in this series. Is that true, Father?
That's true, yeah. We started telling our story in a book called Rebuilt, which is basically the story of our parish, and coming to the realization that a lot of what we were doing, traditional methods of evangelization and discipleship, were not working that well, and sort of setting off on a road of trying things a little bit different, procedurally.
Now, one of the things that's interesting too, Father, we were talking before the interview, the fact that you had worked at the Archdiocese with the Cardinal Keeler, right? And so you kind of went to a parish about 15 years ago, and you were kind of admitting, I had never done this before, and suddenly I'm there, what do I do? And I think a lot of us think, you know, well, aren't priests taught this and trained to do these kinds of things? But you really found yourself awash, right?
I had a great education in theology, canon law, scripture. I had no education whatsoever in running a parish. And frankly, I was a disaster. I was not good at it at all. And it took me about 5 years to come to the realization, I need to learn how to do this.
Now, Tom, for you, obviously Father's the pastor there. Is that your parish? How did the two of you get connected, and how did you start writing these books together?
No, I didn't grow up in the parish. I actually grew up in Philadelphia, outside Philadelphia. I had no intention of working in the church whatsoever. Actually, I was a political science major.
Yes.
Yeah. Political science major, wanted to work in politics.
Right.
And after a while, that wasn't really working out for me. So a professor from Loyola told me about a youth ministry position at Nativity and introduced me to Father Michael. And I thought I'd work there 2 or 3 years, and I'd wait for something better to come along and decide this is really the most important work there is.
And when did you realize or come to the conclusion yourself, or was it mutual conclusion that, you know, things needed to change?
I think it was mutual, but not that we had any great discussions about it. For me, I was burning out. I started out in youth ministry. I don't do that anymore, but my job was, I thought, just doing a bunch of activities for kids and crab feasts and ski trips and lock-ins and and I was burning myself out.
Are those really bad things, or what is it about those
No, I
things?
think it was without a purpose, and it wasn't. If you would ask me why does the church exist or why does your ministry exist, I wouldn't have had an answer. I mean, get kids to church, I guess would have been my answer. But the clarity came of making disciples and forming kids and disciples, and what's our clear strategy for doing that? I had no thought on that.
Okay.
So.
Okay, Father, what's the difference between having pizza parties and those ski things and making, let's talk about the youth group, because we were talking about that, disciples. How is it different?
Discipleship is about being students of Jesus Christ and becoming a little bit more like him today than yesterday, and a little bit more Christ-like tomorrow than today, and then sharing that message, evangelizing. Discipleship is about evangelization. And discipleship and evangelization, or what we call going deeper and going wider in our faith, was exactly what we weren't doing. We were kind of stalled. Whether it was youth ministry pizza parties, or whether it was adult, faith formation classes, we weren't going any place as a parish. We were just kind of stuck. And in the process, as parish staff, we were burning ourselves out.
Right. Let me ask you, because obviously when you finally decided that things needed to change, how did you go about figuring out what those changes needed to be?
It was a very difficult process. It was very difficult. It was like walking in the dark, I would say.
Yeah, and trying to just learn from effective churches and what they were doing, and finding best practices.
And when you say churches, Tom, are you just talking about Catholic parishes, or also what some of the major Protestants have done as well?
That's sort of the little secret behind it all. We actually were willing to learn from successful evangelical churches.
Right. So Rick Warren's name in here too. Right.
Rick is somebody that we learned a lot from, and he's a good friend of ours. He's a good friend of EWTN.
Right. Exactly.
Too.
He's bound with Raymond several times. And
yeah.
Stuff like that.
I think there was for us, a dynamism that happened, that we stepped out of our comfort zone. We kind of joke in Rebuilt about how we're stepping onto a different planet.
Right.
And I think that's growth in the church is always going to come when leaders are willing to step outside their comfort zone and grow and learn. And from that, there comes a dynamism.
And what would you think of the major thing that your takeaway was when you came back after kind of polling the different approaches that were out there in the Catholic sphere, and also with some of the Protestant megachurches and that? What was there a core thing you walked away with?
We tend to say there's about three key lessons, really. That number one, that the churches had a crystal clear focus on people not going to church, and they understood the unchurched person in their community,
and they wanted to get them back to
and they wanted to reach them.
They had a heart for them.
Right.
They really knew them, and they loved them, and were willing to do whatever they needed to do to get them back to church.
See. Okay.
And then the weekend worship they had would draw them in, and so they created great experiences there
that people want to be a part of. People love.
Right, and they feel the community there.
Right. And then the third we say is that they were willing to challenge the people already in church to reach those people.
I see.
And we talk about Rebuilt, how we saw it as kind of consumer Christianity. We thought the church was there to help them consume religion. And there was a switch that kind of flipped for us, like, no, our job is to challenge those people already in our pews to take ownership for their faith.
Exactly.
And to take responsibility for the mission of the church.
Well, that's what the new evangelization really is all about.
It's the heart of
it?
the new evangelization, I think, is that each of us become disciple makers.
Right, and it's not just the unchurched, it's for the church. And it's not up for you, Father. You can't go to everybody.
Right.
It's really up for all of us as Catholics to live up to our call and live our lives in such a way that we challenge our neighbors and our family to be a better Catholic, a better Christian.
In the process, we're strengthening our own
ourselves,
faith.
Right. Exactly. So communication seems to be a major thing in this particular book, rebuilding your message, because it obviously has to do with the message. We always hear communication is important. Was the communication poor before, or was it the message wasn't right, or was it both?
It was both.
Okay.
It was both. We didn't realize the various ways in which we were communicating. One of the things we're trying to do in this book is say that everything that's happening in your parish life is a form of communication.
Right.
Whether it's the kind of greeting that people get when they come in the front door of the church, or it's what's in your bulletin, or it's what's happening after Mass in the coffee, and donut fellowship that might be going on.
Right.
All of these are forms of communication, not just my homily on Sunday morning.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good point, because obviously, if you look in the bulletin, it can tell you in a sense what's important to that parish.
Yes.
Sure.
More so than you might think that it is.
One of the things we say is look at your bulletin. That's going to tell you, if I was an outsider, what would I assume is the key to growing to be a follower of Jesus Christ, or what your church is all about.
Right.
So that could be a sobering exercise.
Right,
sometimes.
exactly. Is bingo on the front page, or what exactly are you kind of focusing on? And then in being welcoming, I think one of the challenges sometimes in the parishes as well is you can have people who are very good people, who are very involved with doing stuff, but sometimes they're not that open to other people stepping up. As much as we all say we want new people to step in, when they step in, they're stepping on my toes because I've been the person who always was doing this before or that. Did you find that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. You've got people, great-hearted people who have stepped up to the plate and done something, maybe done it for years in a parish, and they're afraid that if they let it go, it's going to die or it's going to become something else. And really what we need to be doing in our parishes is just expanding that pool of volunteer ministers.
Right, exactly. And you also think to some degree some people have also, you build up your worth in that particular thing and see yourself in that role, and then suddenly I don't have that role, and I feel like, what does that mean for me? And I've been all these years and now I'm being cast aside. So I think it's that kind of Christian approach where we have to sometimes step back and say, we have to do the things for the betterment of the parish overall in the community, and realize that sometimes, as one evangelist once said, sometimes somebody plays the guitar better than you, sometimes they sing a little better than you. It may make you uncomfortable, but you have to be open to that.
And that's another form of service.
Right, ministry is to serve others. It's not about me being in the spotlight.
Right. And sometimes people get caught up in that. But what you meant, go ahead, Father.
There's the flip side to that is that in many of our parishes, and it certainly was true in our parish, there were things that we had to stop doing. We were just doing too much in many cases. And some of the things we were doing were really not missional. And so we just had to kill programs that were perfectly fine programs in themselves. They just weren't making disciples.
Okay, so they were like you said, they were good, nothing wrong with them, but they weren't core to your mission.
Nothing wrong with crab
somebody
feast.
would look at an organization and say, we have to focus on the things that are core to our mission.
That's right.
This is our mission. These are the things that get there. These are wonderful things. They're great, but if they're taking away from our core, then we have to let those go.
Right. No one else in our community is making disciples. I mean, we can do other things. I can hold social events for kids, but no one else is trying to bring them closer to Jesus Christ in our community. That's our unique mission.
If
we're not doing it, nobody else is
done it. Or else the Protestant pastor down the block might be doing it.
Yeah.
And it's rebuilding your message is a lot of how-to ways that a parish can go about doing that, and messaging in different ways, using the internet, how you use the bulletin, what you use, the homily, etc., things like that. One of the things I wonder too with these things, because sometimes I think the challenges in the Catholic Church can be in relation to, let's say, a Protestant megachurch, is the fact that the more people who come to my megachurch, the more revenue we raise, the more I'm anointed, the more the organization can grow. It shows possible. You're a Catholic priest. You've got the people who show up at your parish and say, I'm entitled to be there, I'm Catholic, this is my local parish, and you're lucky you can keep up with the people who are there already. So how do you get the motivation to say, we got to go out and get those unchurched people,
You got to build a culture in which the people in the pews have a hunger for the people who are not in the pews. And I think really it is awakening among our people, because we have family members that are no longer in the pews. All of us, many of us do. And we all know how that feels, and we all know the hurt in our heart because of that. And if we can just expand that beyond, my sister or my cousin to all the other unchurched people in our community. And as we said, that's deepening our own faith.
People need it now more than ever, because in many ways the culture out there is so coarse and getting coarser that we really need the support systems that many times a parish or extended families would have that don't exist many times now.
In the midst of that coarse culture, in the midst of that hostile culture sometimes, we cannot turn in on ourselves and become an encampment against the world. We've got to be radically open to
Well, that's why we need to be informed Catholics who engage in culture and attempt to change it, not allow them to change us, nor allow us to recede to where we lose our religious liberty and becomes freedom of worship. Where it's okay what you believe inside your church, but don't say anything once you leave.
Exactly. We're here to transform the culture, not to separate ourselves from it. And it begins, we think, at the parish level. The parish is the heart of the church.
Right. Well, the church, in many ways people see it as, there's the Vatican and Rome. It's an incredibly decentralized church. In many ways, more decentralized than some of the Protestant churches are.
Absolutely.
Effectively in the way that the pastor is in the parish and things like that. What do you do for the people, though? I was thinking about, we want to be open and bring people, or, it seems like the only time we worry about the people who aren't going to church is worried about how early I have to get to Mass on Christmas
Eve
or Easter, because somebody who never goes to church might be sitting in my seat. And I do that, and you know, you think to yourself, and you're trying to say, you know, these people at least are coming now. Here's an opportunity.
Right.
But for many of us, I remember a priest one time saying, you better get here early because those people will be sitting in your seats.
And I think that's what we're trying to communicate to our parish is not get here early, but how are you welcoming those people?
Right.
So
Get here early and serve.
and serve, right. So for Easter Sunday, we did a mass very early in the morning for our volunteer ministers. We said, you come to this mass, then you come later and you serve. You greet at the door.
Okay.
You serve on our host team, which is kind of a traditional
Here's
usher
our
role.
chance to engage these people and get them, give them a reason to come back.
And that's exciting, that's energizing as a parish. You know, we quote John Paul II in Rebuild about just when you, I'm paraphrasing his quote, but when you evangelize, it brings refreshments and vitalization to the parish itself. And when people in their parishes want to reach people that are not coming to church, the lost, the fallen away Catholics, it will revitalize those parishes.
Very good. Well, thank you for that message, rebuilding your message, Father Michael White and Tom Corcoran. Thanks for dropping by Bookmark.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you so much.